The Rambam had said, just as we find choli haguf, illness due to one's deficiency, physical deficiency, whether it's chemical imbalance or nutritional deficiency, and when the body does not function as it does due to these deficiencies, when we experience things in the physical, we don't experience them as what they are. And he gives examples. There's an illness due to deficiency. When you eat something sweet, it tastes bitter. And something bitter tastes sweet. And the person craves earth, clay, which is not edible. Or you crave carbon, heat carbon, which is not edible. These are signs that the person is actually experiencing something very serious. To crave something which is inedible, which is detrimental, is an indication there's a problem in the person's chemical and physical function. He says, identically, there's what we call the illness of the soul, because the spirituality of the person is so-called short-circuited due to being exposed or experiencing or engaging in activities which are counter to what spirituality is, contrary, antithesis. This actually it actually destroys the system, the spiritual system. And now the system doesn't process as things should be processed. Normally, the soul desires spirituality. It gravitates towards spirituality. There's a struggle, the body and the soul. We crave, but simultaneously, intellectually, we have a sense of what's right. This person, because he's so spiritually upended, not only does not desire spirituality, he despises it. He cannot tolerate it. He wants to run from it and even snuff it out. And he cites Isaiah the prophet before the destruction of the first temple, when he says to the people who were so far gone, you refer to light as darkness and darkness as light. You see the ultimate as the ultimate detriment, and the detriment as the ultimate level of success, which is only a confirmation of where they were at, that the systems were totally failing. And they would say evil is good and good is evil, which we're experiencing in our own time. Evil is good and good is evil. You know, the Talmud tells us, when we speak about a person who's a shota means, it doesn't mean a retarded person. A person can have a superior IQ. A shota means a person who's unbalanced. He could have 190 IQ, but if he has no control over his behavior, he's not considered a competent person. A competent person means a person who has control over himself. You have the ability to rein in, and you can deal with your inhibitions. A person who's a shota, a person that has this chemical imbalance, what we call deranged. You know, it's interesting. There's arranged and deranged. He's only deranged because he doesn't have the ability to set order in his life, because he's out of control and he has no ability to take control. That's a shota. What's an indication of that? A person goes, takes money, something, and throws it in the river. I mean, if you understand, and we're talking person who understands what money is. So why are you destroying it? Person goes and tears his clothing. But if you tear your clothing, they're not as they should be, and they don't protect as they should protect once they're tattered. But a person can't control himself. So what does that mean? You see something of value, you don't appreciate its value, and therefore you destroy it. Whether it's a person money, throwing it in the river, or tearing your clothing. Or a person sleeps in a cemetery. A normal person doesn't want to sleep in a cemetery. It's not he has nowhere else to sleep. He can sleep in a comfortable bed. He chooses to sleep in a cemetery. What's this all about? Evidently, there's something wrong. They're indicators. They're indicators regarding one's spirituality. I always say, people are, even Jews, they have no tolerance for Judaism. So you ask them, why? Because it's not my cup of tea. May not be cup, but why can't you tolerate it? Because I know what it's all about. Here's the person. How much time have you really given to research what Judaism is all about? Well, I heard enough about it. Where are you coming from? To pass judgment at such an extreme, with such extreme reaction, without even really researching it properly, or really having barely any understanding what it is. How do you take on such a negative stance against Judaism? The answer is, the person has a sick soul. Just as you have physical illness, you have spiritual illness. And this kind of behavior, this kind of attitude is a confirmation the man's soul is sick. When a person recognizes he's physically not well, what do? You seek out medical help, go to a doctor. When a person has this kind of illness, spiritual illness, who are the ones who are the experts how to deal with it? Give the person a chance of recovery. Only the great Chachamim, the wise, the Talmudists, the Torah sages of the generation, they are adept and they have the ability to advise the person how to deal with this issue. As a person goes to a psychiatrist, when he has a psychological mental condition, and he deals with it based on his understanding of the illness, Chazal, the Chachomim, they are adept in understanding the source and how to address the source and how to overcome the issue. These are the words of Rambam, paraphrasing them. You have a reaction. So, Rabbi, how many times have I told you I'm not interested? I'm not interested. Don't harass me. Look, you know something? As I always say, you can only take the horse to water. You can't force it to drink. That's it. I've tried. That's it. After 120 years, person comes before the heavenly court and they say, why? He says, because I never had the opportunity. How many times did you say to the rabbi, I've had enough, stop harassing me? That only tells you where you were at. A Jew doesn't behave the way you behaved, with this extreme negative, literally hate for something that you should be. Don't you think you have a problem? He never recognized he had a problem. He always believed Jews have problems. He has no problem. He says, who are the Chachamim who have the ability to heal the souls, the spirit? They will teach him certain teachings that he should have an appreciation to what is, and ultimately, this will rehabilitate him to bring him to a good place. What a person recognizes. He has an issue. For some reason, he can't tolerate Judaism. Can't tolerate the rabbi. Can't even tolerate Jews. When he sees a Jew who identifies with that, he has difficulty coexisting with that person. He knows he has a problem, but he doesn't appreciate his problem. And therefore he doesn't seek out help. And he doesn't go to the wise men, the Talmudists, the people who are adept and professionals in the spiritual realm. Alema meshloma chochmas chochma umusar avilim bozu. Wisdom and musar and restraint, spiritual restraint. The skeptics, they disgrace. It's not so simple. You bring a deal, very valuable opportunity, financial to a person, and he doesn't just say, I'm not interested. He goes and he doesn't say, I appreciate, no thank you. Not for now. But he goes and he embarrasses the person. He disgraces that person, brings him an opportunity. But he wants to help this person. Comes back a second or third time. Again, he gets abused, gets disgraced, gets embarrassed. You realize this man's not coming back with any more deals for this person. It's enough to say no thank you. But I should put myself out and be harmed and embarrassed and hurt. I'm not coming back there. You could only give a person mussar, try to advise him, direct him somehow, but it's to a point. After that point, you're on your own. And the times Hashem says you're on your own. If you had opportunities, like we learned by Paro, first 5 plagues were obvious, he could have seen it. He turned his back on God. God says, something? If you're such an arrogant son of a gun, when that's so obvious you turn your back on me, I'm not coming to knock on your door any longer. You will not have the capacity to even to appreciate that you have the ability to make a choice. That's what's going to happen. You'll be totally oblivious. You'll lose your sensitivity to anything which has to do with the spiritual realm. And that's Chochma, Musar, Avilim, Bozu. Wisdom and Musar, restraint. The skeptics, they disgrace. It's not said without it, they disgrace it. There's a story many years ago. Or Sameach in Israel is a yeshiva for Bali Tshuva. And this person was totally irreligious. And he came from an observant home. And he had a son who was of college age, traveled to Israel. And somehow he was curious what Or Sameach was all about. And he went there. And he liked what he heard and what he saw. And he enrolled. He was an adult. Calls his father, Dad, I'm here in Israel. I'm going to spend a year here. And he had no Jewish orientation, the son. But he was a very smart boy, young man, and he did well there. A year passes. He's completing his first tractate of the Talmud. He's very proud. He calls his father in the United States. He wants to invite him to come for the completion of that tractate. And there's a big celebration in the yeshiva in Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. His father agrees to come. And his father sees all these young men similar to his son, who come from these secular backgrounds, where the parents did not provide for them any understanding of what Judaism was all about. And now his son is completing what we call a siyum. He's making a siyum on a tractate, catered meal. And he hears the way his son completes it. And somehow he's touched by this. And the various rabbis spoke. They all speak in English. They're all Americans there, or Englishmen. And the father asks, he would like to speak. The father of this young man. And he says, I want to tell the story. There was this person, he planted an orchard. In this orchard, every type of species of fruit grew. And it was tended and cultivated and taken care of. It only produced the best fruits. And then the person had only one and only son, and he left the orchard to be inherited to his son. His son inherits the orchard. And the first thing he does, takes an axe, chops down all the trees, destroys every fruit tree in the orchard. Total destruction. Okay? And he takes earth, soil, and covers over the area where the trees originally were. Topsoil. And what happens? 5 years pass, 10 years pass. All of a sudden, the roots are starting to peek out through this soil, start penetrating this soil, and the trees are growing again. And years pass, and all of a sudden, the orchard has regrown. So this man says, my father left me a heritage. He tried to teach me who we are. I went and destroyed it. I turned my back on it. I wanted to uproot it, that my family should have no relevance to it. What happens? Fast forward 30 years, my son, he's completing a tractate. As much as you try to snuff it out, it always resurfaces. That was the punchline of his speech. The Jew innately has the ability to resurface. You have to always suppress that. You have to try, people try to keep snuffing it out. But if you understand exactly what that illness of the soul is, and you go to the experts, and they know exactly how to reactivate and rekindle that spark. And once that spark's rekindled, it moves. It moves very quickly. And it gives a person a sense of feeling. You have a sense. It's not you just going through motions. You have a sense of what you do has value. If you ever took a picture, there was a film and a picture after the 6-Day War, the soldiers retook the old city of Yerushalayim, and they retook the wall, the Kosel, or the Kotel. And many of the soldiers who fought in the 6-Day War were not observant. They weren't even traditional. And you see them, when they came to the wall, they took off their helmets, which they fought in. They fought to conquer the city, and they were sobbing at the wall. They were sobbing. What are they crying about? They don't value this. The answer is, they realized through what they did and what they conquered. Literally, they experienced miracles. 6 days, they defeated hundreds of millions of Arabs, endless armies of Arabs, surrounded. They should have been destroyed. And now they're coming back home to the Temple Mount, to the wall of the temple, and they're all sobbing. A Jew has something deep in him that if you somehow touch that core, all of a sudden it starts flickering, and it ignites and can overtake a person. And once you have that feeling, you don't mock it any longer. You don't disgrace it any longer. And if you're lucky enough, you have an interest to pursue it. The curiosity will cause you to speak to people, enter the dialogues, read material to try to understand what it's all about. At one time, people were embarrassed to even consider becoming observant when the families were not. Today, with everything we have at the computer, you can download anything in the privacy. You go into a corner, you have your phone, you can download everything. Nobody has to know anything. You could be a clandestine Jew. You become a Marano within your family if you have an interest. But if you have no interest, something else comes up on your phone, whatever that something else, or on your computer. Because the person doesn't recognize and appreciate what he's lacking, what he's missing. What about if he feels an antipathy towards Judaism, a negativity? That's more than You don't know what you're missing. There's something negative. Why do I feel negative? Other Jews don't feel negative, although they're not observant. Paisley roof awesome. We're on number 2. How is one healed from this spiritual illness? Nishu balchema. Okay, now we're talking about conditioning. A person who has a tempest anger, uncontrollable anger, everything sets him off. Omram lo lahanik atzmo shemhuka v'kulal lo yigash klal. They used to say everything's self-control, willpower. It's willpower. Everything's willpower, self-control. If somebody curses you, somebody abuses you, keep quiet. Don't respond, don't react. Behave as if you have no sense of that. They used to say, it takes two to fight. Somebody makes a remark, ignore it. He may make the remark again. But the more you ignore it, the more he realizes it's falling on deaf ears. But the question is, but how do you tolerate that kind of remark? Well, you're trying to condition yourself, to train yourself not to be touched by something which is negative, which normally you would ignite and explode. And if you do it long enough, naturally, you become insensitive to it over time. And you should conduct yourself, behave this way over an extended period of time, until the anger will be uprooted from his emotion, from his heart. You do it long enough, it stops. It doesn't bother you. One person was self-centered, pompous, focused singly on himself, only to advance himself. You put yourself in a disgraceful position. Everything's disgraceful, everything based on what you expect. So if you expect something, you don't get it, you feel insulted, disgraced, denied, whatever word you could use, he feels that. But you put yourself in the extreme position where you will feel disgraced. You should sit in a location which doesn't indicate any status. People of the lowest status in society, that's where they are, that's who you should be. You should wear literally tattered, worn-out clothing. Hamavazis is lavshem, that you feel embarrassed wearing that kind of clothing. Threadbare. We're not talking about unclean. Until the sense of entitlement, because you feel that you're worthy and you're special, will be uprooted from his heart. And through this new conditioning, you'll come to that center point. Shehu derech haTorah, which is the good path. Through reconditioning, it's possible to come back to the center path. And once you were able to achieve that, you're able to continue this way for the rest of your life without difficulty. You have to break bad habits. Breaking bad habits is very difficult. But over time, if you persist and you repeat it long enough, ultimately you're going to change. It's interesting. Anything people put their minds to, they could accomplish. Give you an example. Person goes, buys himself $1,000 bottle of scotch, and he has friends, and it's such quality. When you first taste it, you may not appreciate its taste, its flavor. You have to drink it for quite a while. And initially, you may actually taste it as something which is not pleasant. So the one who offers these, you see this bottle, it's $1,000. It's only $1,000 because it is something special. It's quality scotch, but you got to drink it. And you got to get used to it. And if you drink it long enough, you'll be taken by this. You'll realize it's one of a kind. So when it comes to scotch, if you're interested in scotch, you drink it long enough, you'll develop a taste for that scotch. Naturally, it doesn't somehow conform with your taste buds and what you considered tasty or pleasant. But if you drink it long enough, your taste buds will acclimate themselves to it, and you'll be interested. So something which is truly in your interest. Person has negative behavior patterns. And by doing this, you'll be able to be in a good place. You'll have control. You'll become pleasant. You're no longer self-centered. Yet, it's too difficult. I think I'm okay. But why? If you see something as a necessity, it has to be, nothing's too difficult. If you see it's maybe an upgrade for the effort that's needed to make that upgrade, it's not worth it. Because you don't see it as really negative as it really is. So everything's based on the way you see it. You see it as unacceptable. How do I live this way as a human being? It's a disgrace. I feel this, I'm self-disgracing myself. To act so pompously. How do I do this? But everything's based on recognition. The more you recognize the negativity of that behavior pattern, that characteristic, you're going to want to actually to excise it from yourself. That's what you're going to want. And once you appreciate its negativity, you'll go to every length to make sure to do whatever you can do to make a change. So why people don't make changes? Because they don't appreciate the negativity of it. But to the degree that you do, that will determine how far you go. Overtime writes in the introduction to the laws of Lashon Hara, first he goes and he tells you there are 14, even before that, in his introduction, he cites a Zohar, that when people are not careful what comes out of their mouths, the consequences and the ramifications are so disastrous and catastrophic, and the one who speaks with an unchecked mouth, that person is responsible for all the tragedies that come upon the Jewish people. And tragedies, we're not talking about a slap on the wrist. It could be a lot worse than that. Lives are lost. Communities are impoverished, where people are denied the basic amenities. This is all because people are not responsible what comes out of their mouths. That's firstly. You have to appreciate the consequence of doing the wrong thing. Then a person says, but what I do wrong? I didn't state it's wrong, but why is it wrong? Chofetz Chaim says, I'll tell you what's wrong. Over a short period of time, you can be in violation of 14 positive commandments and 17 negative commandments. And some of those negative commandments are very serious negative commandments. Some of them are called desecrating God's name. Because when you should be a role model, and you're not the role model, and you are the takeaway for people how they should behave, that's a Chil Hashem. You're supposed to be the model of what a good Jew is. And you are the worst example of what that is. That's Chil Hashem. Says, and eventually you come to the equidistant point, you're going to continue your whole life. We know people vacillate. We all vacillate. One day we feel inspired. 5 minutes later, you're less inspired. Up and down. We don't take, not extreme, But the degrees that we go to the right, to the left, and sometimes down. That's normal behavior. So he said, no, but once you reach the equidistant point, you'll conduct yourself your whole life this way. Now, we're talking about conditioning yourself to pattern yourself that your behavior, your natural instincts are different instincts because you're so trained to behave a certain way and you're at that equidistant point, the natural feeling will be as it should be, whether it's negative or positive. That's what we're talking about. And because all your behavior now is going to be based upon those evaluations, those lenses that you look through. If you look through a lens, all you see yourself, you're going to continue being arrogant and pompous and self-centered. You see that lens as transparent, and you can see the other person through that lens, then you have humility. Because I value the other person. I notice things special about the other person. That's the understanding. He says on this line, Yasib Sharkol Deios. This is the way you address every one of your predilections. If they're off, you have to go and condition yourself. Go to the other extreme. And eventually, you're going to get to the equidistant point. V'yazon derech emtzos shu derech tova. Im hoyorochok l'kotzer ho'echod yarch atzmo l'kotzer hasheni. Let's say the person's behavior is so extreme, he's at one end of the spectrum. You have to go to the other end of the spectrum, the opposite end. And you have to conduct yourself to be like a different person. Person was pompous, all of a sudden comes into shul, he behaves like a docile puppy. They said, what happened? Did he have a stroke? No. People are wondering. No. He himself is suppressing the need for that attention. But if you do it long enough, you're not going to have the need for that attention any longer. Okay, we're going to stop here. Any comments or questions? We'll